Ahoy! Here we are. It's muggy in the desert. Anywho, Sunday salutations. We're looking at July 16th, 2017. Had a dance party with God last night. Some of you saw that. I went on a Bob Fosse kick again. It's truly tapped in gent. Anywho, I trust you were inspired or got what you needed. So we're going to speak of, announcements. So getting ready to go to Kauai to start the monastery up in Kauai for the next few weeks. It's the first round. We've got a full house. And then I'll be doing that, hopefully, God willing, every 2 months. And then still going up to San Francisco every other month. I'll be in San Francisco the week of the 16th. There's still some slots left that Thursday. I should have it right here, but I don't because it was on my mind to speak of. But you'll get the newsletter. Again, if you don't get my newsletter, go to reverendzoeinman.com and you can sign up. Let's see. Kauai Monastery, San Francisco, week of the 16th. You can also just contact me directly at revzo@reverendzoeinman.com. If you just want to grab a slot, there's a few left. And then I'm doing a class that Thursday. Oh, for God's sake. Let's see what date that is. Pardon me, you guys. 17th. I'm doing a class on integrity. What the hell is integrity? More on that later, Hosen. It's going to be 6 to 9. It's going to be $50. And then I think that's it. Oh, and my God, the Dark Night of the Soul virtual class is on fire. Everybody who can't come to Kauai and take the 4-day retreat a week from now, been inspired. So if you are interested in that, go ahead, again, contact me. Okay, Reverend Zoe Inman, revzo@reverendzoeinman.com. We are going to speak of vampirism. I've been sort of alluding around it, and one of my dear, lovely people asked me to speak on this or elaborate on it. I'm looking at this particular quote from Dracula I want to speak to you in a minute. So it resides, there's narcissism. Again, everyone's a narcissist if you're in a human body. But this particular thing I'm speaking of resides somewhere between the narcissism and the Jezebel spirit, right? And those of you who don't really understand what the Jezebel spirit is, it actually comes from the Bible. And it's a reference to a woman, and it's the Old Testament. It's in Kings, if you'd like to look it up. It's Kings verse 21 verse 8 is where they really start referencing, or actually probably before that. Verse 21. Anyway, look around there and you'll see it, and then to where she is killed in Kings 2, verse 33. Just look at Kings around that area right there. So it's interesting, a lot of women these days, they sort of like think that there's pride in this Jezebel spirit. There's no pride in the Jezebel spirit. I've alluded to the movie Betty Davis. That gives you a good take on what the Jezebel spirit is. They're entitled, they're completely self-centered, and they know they're master manipulators, especially of weak men. That's just the spirit. That's just the truth. In this case, Jezebel married Ahab's. Ahab was a king at the time, and she married him, and he was a rather devoted man in the sense of the Old Testament, and she was what we'd call more on the pagan side of things, and got him to give up his faith and worship idols. That's no disrespect to anybody; it's just the truth. A lot of like the old kind of idea. Like, there's a lot of practices that are still focused on manipulating the external world versus cultivating the inner spirit. And that was more of what she was into. A lot of people kind of get lured into that sort of thing, even nowadays, right? Manipulating the external world. It could go black magic, right? And everyone practices black magic. If you didn't, here's another topic. I'm on fire today. Because everyone's taught to be calculating, and calculation is necessity to be able to practice black magic, right? So that would be very interesting for you to reflect on, you know, how calculating you are on a daily basis, because you are opening yourself up to influences when you are living a life of calculation. So Jezebel basically married this man who was weak, didn't have a backbone necessarily, and she would talk him into doing things. And in this case, he couldn't get a vineyard, right? The gentleman didn't want to sell him a vineyard. So she, Jezebel, did classic triangulation, character assassination of this gentleman, and got him killed so they could actually she and her husband took the vineyard. That gives you a taste of what the Jezebel spirit is, under the guise of, righteous entitlement. Eventually, her husband goes away, gives her up, and is like sort of in a state of penance because he feels horrible about everything that's going on. But she just goes completely crazy and wears lipstick and has her hair long and all this stuff. This is why a lot of chicks like worship her a little bit these days, but not understanding what she is or what she was doing. Anyway, she was killed. When the man came to kill her, she was wanton and very like, oh yeah, you're going to kill me. And anyway, he's like, yeah. And the parable, the prophet Elijah, he prophesied that she was going to be killed and eat by dogs. And she was thrown out the window, and the king who came to kill her, the one who took over from her husband, goes in and eats while she's being completely destroyed by dogs. The only thing left was her skull, her hands, and her feet, which is very distinctive of how she lived. Complete indulgence, complete me focus, and her battery was her husband. She always needed a battery, right? The vampire always needs a battery. They need a food source. See, this is a little different than narcissists. They're narcissists, but these are calculating. These are calculating. The calculation, the conscious calculation takes it to a whole other level of diabolical blackness. The vampire is very calculating and conscious that they do need a food source. And the reason they need a food source is because they've separated from God. They separated from the inner resource. And if you go back to Bram Stoker's, especially, what's his name? Francis Ford Coppola's, you got to watch that flick after this or sometime soon. If you remember at the beginning, he was devout, right? He was devout. Yes, he was a knight in the Crusades. History repeats itself. But he was devout in the sense that he was devout, right? His version of devout. And in that, if you recall, his wife was set up and told that he actually died, but he didn't die. So she committed suicide. So when he got home from the war, she was dead. And he turned against God because he didn't get his way. It didn't work out the way he wanted to. He takes the cross and he like stabs he stabs, he takes a sort of stabs the cross and all the blood comes out and he basically separates from God. It's a pretty deep story when you shed the light on this. And therefore, it doesn't mean you have to be Christian, but you're cutting yourself off from the inner resources, from that inner sanctum, that inner light, that inner source. Then you have to then calculate and depend on somebody else or somebody's else, like more than one. And they're really good at finding someone who has low self-esteem, not like the narcissist, but sometimes the narcissist can be not conscious, right? What takes us to a whole level like Jezebel is the calculation. They find someone who's weak, and then they can like if you're susceptible to compliments, they're very good at, versus sort of there's a gaslighting element, but they're very good at complimenting you. And if they see that sort of opening and taking what they're giving out of a need, then they know they have you. You can tell when you're in the field of a vampire or a Jezebel, because there is sometimes it's classic, like the air empties out of the room, but this is more where you can feel your life force actually draining out of you. And for a spiritual practice, coming back to what this whole showboat's about, it would be very good for you not to avoid these situations, because this is a part of our education here, because these folk exist, this energy exists, is to track back when you're in the situation, or if you just black out and can't recall, go to that moment and see what was happening, what was the conversation, but more importantly, what were you thinking and what were you feeling? I just did a webinar yesterday on the power of thought. People understand it, but they don't understand that as artistry. Thinking is artistry. So what masterpiece are you creating? This sort of premise, and how that then influences a lot of other things. But I don't want to sidetrack. What were you thinking? What were you feeling? What were the circumstances? Not, again, in this practice, we don't want to get too focused on the person who's practicing vampirism, because that would then get into judgment and arrogance. It's more to pay attention to what's happening in you. Now, there are some of you that may actually be practicing vampirism. How do you know? You know. You think you deserve something. You think you need something from somebody. It can hide under envy and jealousy, which then gets suppressed, and then the compliments, right? All the compliments, not a genuine compliment. That would be healing for the jealousy. But oh no, the suppression, what really makes this unique form of vampirism is the jealousy and envy, and then the repression of that, and then the overcompensation, the compliments, and the support, and the interest, and all that jazz. So check yourself out. Perhaps you need to delve in there and excavate some deep-rooted jealousies and envies, because that perpetuates some of this really ugly behavior. Back to Betty Davis and Jezebel. It's a very intense form of entitlement. But when you're with somebody who's that way, there's always this subtle petulance and insecurity. Like they're always having to prove they're better or smarter in like subtler ways often, Also, they're very good at finding where you're insecure. And sometimes they'll come in and tell you compliments about yourself to try to build you up and make you feel better. But that's another way to hook you. So then you actually feel you need them, or they're really on your side. But then you realize there's something kooky going on. Like when you realize that you can't get them out of your mind, or that you feel that you, like without them you die, or that your life would fall apart. Be very, very, very suspicious about such things. Here's the quote. Where's the glasses? There's some great quotes. But anyway, this is from Dracula. Once again, welcome to my house. Come freely, go safely, and leave something of the happiness you bring. Oh, I'm so excited. All right, I could go on and on, but I think I'll shut up. Let's see, is there anything else I need to say? When you're disconnected from yourself, capital S, you are susceptible to vampirism and to being a vampire. So onward, onward, onward. Another day in paradise. Aloha. Thank you.